Hey everybody, Nick Espinoza, your chief security fanatic here, and it is Sunday, so we are doing breaches of the week. And as always, I'd like to thank the people that message me, link me, tag me, whatever it was to get me a lot of these breaches. It is always, always appreciated. And that is David Walker, Jason Dance, Michael Phillipson, Barrett Peterson, and Chris Fowlon. Guys, thank you so much. And if you have a breach for me, please feel free to send it my way. I am more than happy to give you a shout out as well. Let's get started because this week's video is shaping up to be one of the longest yet. And just once, I would literally love to have a breaches video on Sunday be like 3 minutes long, or me simply saying, there are no breaches. Go have fun. I don't think that's going to happen until the day I die, though. And so with that, let's get started and talk about Bonobos clothing store because they suffered a massive breach exposing millions of customers' personal information. Basically, what happened was a cloud backup of theirs was downloaded by a threat actor known as Shiny Hunters. They are getting pretty popular here every week for me to report on. And so what happened was they basically leaked this 70 gigabyte SQL file that contained various internal tables and other information, including customers' addresses, phone numbers, partial credit card numbers, meaning the last 4 digits, order information, and password histories. The amount varies by category of what they got, but addresses and phone numbers, for example, are 7 million. Account information is 1.8 million registered customers and 3.5 million partial credit card numbers. So, heads up if you use Bonobos. Moving on, let's talk about Malwarebytes. You may actually have their free antivirus software on your computer, or your company may pay for it. They became the 4th security firm targeted by the actors that pulled off the SolarWinds attack, and they come after Microsoft, FireEye, and CrowdStrike has disclosed. Now, Malwarebytes said that this intrusion is not related to the SolarWinds attack because Malwarebytes, according to them, do not use any of the SolarWinds software in their internal network, but it was the same attackers. Instead, they said that the attackers breached their internal systems by exploiting a dormant email protection product within their Microsoft Office 365 tenant. Now, Malwarebytes says that they learned of this intrusion from the Microsoft Security Response Center on December 15th, which detected suspicious activity coming from the dormant Office 365 security app. Now, according to Malwarebytes co-founder and CEO Marcin Klezinski, and I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly, and I quote, Our internal systems showed no evidence of unauthorized access or compromise in any on-premise and production environments. Our software remains safe to use. So heads up, Malwarebytes users. Moving on, let's talk about a company called Pixlr. That's Pixlr. They are a popular free online photo editing application, somewhat similar to Adobe's Photoshop. And over this past weekend, a threat actor, once again, Shiny Hunters, shared this database for free on a hacker forum, and they claim that they stole this Pixlr database when they also breached 123RF, which is a stock photo site. Now, both Pixlr and 123RF are actually both owned by the same company Imagine. Now, the alleged Pixlr database posted by Shiny Hunters contains 1,921,141 user records, consisting of email addresses, login names, hashed passwords, the user's country, whether they signed up for a newsletter, and other internal information. So heads up to you if you use Pixlr. Moving on. Let's talk about Excellus Health Plan. This is actually a update from their 2015 data breach because they just agreed to pay $5.1 million to the Office for Civil Rights at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. The Office for Civil Rights are those that collect for HIPAA breaches. Now, essentially, they have basically had over 9.3 million people affected, and they are based out of New York, and their health services insure basically 1.5 million in upstate and western New York. So heads up to you, if you were using Excellus health plan before 2015, you may be entitled to compensation. Moving on, let's talk about Aquaculture. This is a technology group, or rather Aquaculture technology group known as AKVA, AKVA. Because on January 10th, they announced that they were a victim of ransomware, and they basically said that they are in the process of trying to bring everything online and operating manually. I don't have much more information on there, but if I have anything on AKVA, I will let you know. Moving on, basically, we're going to head over to Belgium and a hospital called CHWAPI. That's a hospital in Belgium. They suffered a cyber attack. The attackers claim to have encrypted 40 servers and 100 terabytes of data. And while the hospital services are slowly recovering and surgical operations have resumed, a lot of what the hospital is doing, they are now redirecting patients to other hospitals. So hopefully they will get back online soon. Moving on, we need to talk about some attackers that have been hitting thousands of organizations worldwide because they themselves got a data breach. And here's essentially what happened. The attackers were exfiltrating information basically from all of these organizations that they were hitting and then putting them on domains that they had specifically registered for these tasks. But the problem was they were storing this data in a publicly visible file, and that's when Google search engine found it and put it out there for the world. You could literally Google usernames and passwords because the attackers didn't secure their breaches for ransom. Obviously, that's been cleaned up now. That was a huge problem. That's kind of crazy. Moving on. Let's talk about the Einstein Healthcare Network out of Pennsylvania. Essentially, they waited more than 5 months to make a compromise public. They had a breach of their employee email system, which exposed patient and personal records. It happened on August 5th, and they maintained persistence until August 17th. The data affected is patients' names, dates of birth, medical records, or patient account numbers and or treatment or clinical information, such as diagnosis, medication providers, types of treatments, or treatment locations. Einstein also said, in some instances, patients' health insurance information and or social security numbers were also included in this attack. So you don't have to be an Einstein to have good cyber hygiene. Haha. Moving on. Let's talk about the British school system because a shipment of laptops supplied to British schools by the Department for Education, basically to help kids learn under the lockdown, came preloaded with malware. That's right from the factory, they were giving the kids malware. Now, these affected laptops, which were distributed to schools under the UK government's Get Help with Technology scheme, which started in 2020, came bundled with Gamma-Roo, which is an old remote access worm from the 2010s. Now, this software basically doesn't just spread from one computer to another, it tries to connect to outside servers to carry out instructions. Now, the publication, the Register, understands that a batch of 23,000 computers, the GeoBook 1E running Windows 10, which is made by Tactus Group, basically out of Shenzhen in China, can essentially have these units loaded with malware. A spokesman for the manufacturer did not comment for the Register, and these devices have been shipped over the past 3 to 4 weeks, though it is unclear at this moment how many of them have been infected. One source at the school told the Register that the machines in question seem to have been manufactured in late 2019 and appear to have had their software installed last year. So we'll see what happens there. But heads up, if you have a British school child, you might have an infected laptop. Moving on. Let's talk about adult website MyFreeCams because an attacker is selling a database with the login details for 2 million paying customers of MyFreeCams, the adult video streaming and chat service. On January 14th, the attacker offered to sell a database containing usernames, plain text passwords, which means MyFreeCams was not securing their stuff, and emails belonging to 2 million paying customers. They were offering 10,000 records for $1,500 US worth of Bitcoin, saying that the logins guarantee a profit of at least 10,000 in tokens. So heads up to you if you use MyFreeCams, you may be in trouble. Moving on, let's talk about Nitro Pdf. This is actually an update that I reported on in late 2020 because Nitro's stolen database containing email addresses, names, and passwords for more than 77 million records of Nitro Pdf service users was leaked on January 20th for free. Now, this 14 gigabyte leaked database contains 77,159,696 records with users' email addresses, full names, bcrypt hash passwords, title, company names, IP addresses, and other system-related information. The database has also been added to Have I Been Pwned. So essentially, if you use Nitro Pdf, you can go there and see if you were involved in this breach that just got leaked. But obviously, that's a huge problem for Nitro Pdf. Moving on, let's talk about Intel. Yes, the massive processor maker. because shares of Intel actually fell as much as 9% this past Friday after the company said that its corporate website was hacked, and that essentially pushed Intel to release its fourth quarter earnings much earlier than planned. Now, George Davis, who is Intel's CFO, told the Financial Times that an attacker gained unauthorized access to sensitive data tied to its earning report that was set to be published after the market closed this past Thursday. But upon finding out about the attack, they had no choice but to release the results 6 minutes before the market closed, and so they dropped 9%. That is obviously very crazy, and hopefully Intel will secure their websites from now on. Moving on, we have to talk about undisclosed high-tech and aviation companies because a sophisticated threat actor gained illegal access into the network of multiple high-tech and aviation companies by initially hacking into their cloud-based services. Now, the attacker persistence essentially is looking like it's over 3 years in some instances, meaning they were in there for quite some time. Now, in a recently released report, the NCC Group and its subsidiary Fox IT said researchers encountered this threat actor during numerous incident response engagements between October of 2019 through April of 2020, but the initial infections preceded this time frame in at least one case dating back to 2017. Now, according to researchers, the malicious attackers used credential stuffing, password spraying, and brute force techniques to initially compromise companies' webmail, storage drives, and other cloud-based services from providers like Microsoft and Google. The attackers would then pursue the cloud-based data for Intel on how to actually get into the companies via VPNs, Citrix infrastructure, and other remote networking services. So this is obviously unfolding, and as soon as that comes out, I will be reporting on that here on this video. Moving on, let's talk about the Scottish Environmental Protection Agency, or SEPA, and this is actually an update from last week when I reported on this because there has been basically movement on this. The Conti ransomware gang are the ones that essentially hit them, and as a result of non-payment, Conti published all of its stolen data on their website, including 4,000 documents and databases related to contracts, commercial services, and internal strategies. This is basically the latest update, and SEPA has confirmed this. And so I personally track Conti. I track multiple ransomware gangs. We do that here at Security Fanatics, and sure enough, they dumped a ton of SEPA information, and SEPA confirmed that. So that is obviously a huge problem. Moving on, we need to talk about SonicWall. This is the firewall maker, and heads up if you use SonicWall in any way, shape, or form, because they said this past Friday night that they're investigating a security breach of their internal network after detecting what they described as a coordinated attack. Now, in a short statement posted on their knowledge base portal, the company said that, quote, highly sophisticated threat actors had targeted its internal systems by exploiting probable zero-day vulnerabilities on certain SonicWall secure remote access products. So the company listed NetExtender VPN clients and secure mobile access gateways that were affected by this. They don't have a patch as of yet, but they do have a way to mitigate this. And so if you have a SonicWall or are deploying SonicWalls along your infrastructure, you definitely want to check that out. You are vulnerable right now. Moving on. Let's talk about the Okanagan County in the state of Washington. They got hit with a cyber attack on Monday, January 18th, and computers at the sheriff's office, public health facilities, and all other county government entities are experiencing issues. In addition, their phone system is having technical trouble as well. That's all I have at this time. Obviously, I will keep you up to date, but heads up, Okanagan County, Washington. Moving on, let's talk about Windows utility developer IOBit, because over last weekend, IOBit forum members began receiving emails claiming to be from IOBit, stating that they were entitled to a free 1-year license to their software as a special perk for being a forum member. I cannot say that word today. Now, basically, the victims downloaded a zip file, and that contained a digitally signed file from the legitimate IOBit license manager, but with a DLL file replaced with an unsigned malicious version. And so when users went to basically run the license manager, it executed the malware, and it was DEROHE or DEROHE ransomware that got hit. So heads up, if you're getting anything from IOBit about free anything, don't download it, unpack it, or run it. Moving on. Let's talk about OpenWRT. Now, if you don't know, they are an open source project that provides free and customizable firmware for home routers. So you got that old Linksys and it's not updated anymore. You can actually install OpenWRT on that and make it a little more robust. Now, they disclosed a security breach that took place over last weekend. According to a message posted on their project forum and distributed via multiple Linux and FOSS themed based mailing lists, the security breach took place on Saturday, January 16th, after an attacker accessed an account of a forum administrator. OpenWRT's team said that while the attacker was not able to download a full copy of its database, the attack did download a list of forum users, which included personal details such as usernames and email addresses. No passwords were included in the downloaded data, but citing quote-unquote an abundance of caution, OpenWRT administrators have reset all forum user passwords and API keys. So if you are a member of OpenWRT's forum, you're going to have to change your password because they just reset it on you. Moving on, let's talk about Precision Spine Care. This is a Texas-based spinal care center. They just had an unauthorized individual gain remote access to an employee's email account in an attempt to fraudulently divert funds from the organization. Now, to quote them, "Our investigation revealed that the employee's email account may have contained information relating to some patients' names, addresses, dates of birth, and limited health information. They are actually one of the first, and they have this honor of being one of the first U.S. healthcare companies to flag a potential data breach in 2021 as a HIPAA violation." And so, congratulations, I guess? I don't know. The other one that owns that same kind of congratulations, I guess, is the Agency for Community Treatment Services in Portland, Oregon. This is the next HIPAA breach that we have for 2021 because on October 23rd of 2020, they discovered ransomware and they just disclosed in 2021. So name, date of birth, social security, medical records, treatment information, and health insurance info was all caught up in this. Heads up if you use the Agency for Community Treatment Services in Portland, Oregon. Moving on, I want to give you guys an update on Blackbaud. This is the one that keeps going from mid-2020, and I want to talk about Rady's Children's Hospital in San Diego. I mentioned them as they disclosed months ago, but now the reason why I'm mentioning them is a class action lawsuit was just filed against them on January 20th seeking damages for the basically the data that Blackbaud got exposed. Obviously a huge problem. I think we're going to see a lot more fallout from Blackbaud as the years go by, as all of these organizations and their supply chain start getting sued. Moving on, let's talk about Meet Mindful. This is a dating site. And once again, these shiny hunters are at it because they leak details of basically 2.28 million users registered on meetmindful.com, a website that's been around since 2014. This data is a 1.2 gigabyte file, and it contains real names, email addresses, city, state, and zip codes, body details, dating preferences, marital status, birth dates, latitude and longitude, because apparently their app was hitting your GPS, IP addresses, bcrypt hash, account passwords, Facebook user IDs, and Facebook authentication tokens. So if you're using Meet Mindful to meet that special person in your life, you might want to reset your password, and you might want to let him or her know that you're talking to do that same thing. And finally, and we've got two different finalies for today. I think these are just beyond interesting. One of them is actually going to be an update on Pfizer and Bioin tech, because last week I mentioned that the European Medicines Agency, or EMA, reported that some of the data from Pfizer and BioNTech's COVID-19 vaccine was stolen during a cyber attack in early 2020 and was released online illegally shortly thereafter. This week, we got a scary update because on January 15th, EMA revealed that some of the stolen Pfizer BioNTech vaccine candidate data was actually altered or doctored by the threat actors before being leaked online. The goal, it is believed, was to undermine the public's trust in COVID-19 vaccines. And to quote, "Some of the correspondence has been manipulated by the perpetrators prior to the publication in a way which could undermine trust in vaccines." Now, To me, that speaks of a state-sponsored attack. That is my speculation, but typically when we are looking at undermining the confidence of an entire society or population, or multiple populations and societies that tend to be state actors more than anybody else. Again, I could be wrong. This could be the 400-pound fat guy on his bed in New Jersey that did this, but that is my speculation. But that is terrifying, especially if somebody was taking that and trying to replicate the vaccine. If they were able to do that, let's say they had the lab or the capability to do that, they could seriously get people killed if they're giving them something that is not accurate because it has been altered by a threat actor and maybe they didn't know that. So heads up, if you're in the, let's say, the medical field and you've got a copy of this, it is incorrect. That is a huge, huge problem. And finally, we need to talk about the GDPR. Now, if you don't know, in 2018, March of 2018, the European Union spun up the GDPR, which is their data privacy security regulations for EU citizens. This basically turns up privacy for EU citizens to a very high level. And now we've had almost 3 years of basically the European Union and its citizens living under this data privacy law. And so they're basically starting to get serious about it and lock these down. But the numbers are in for the past 3 years, and they are interesting. Now, this is coming from Engadget. And I was also looking up some other sources as well, but I'm cribbing primarily from them because law firm DLA Piper says that since January 28th of 2020, almost 1 year, the EU has issued around 158.5 million euros, which is about 192 million US, in financial penalties. That is a 39% increase on the previous 20-month period, basically since the beginning of the GDPR. And basically, this is what Piper examined for their report, and they published about this time last year that previous one on the 20 months, as well as increased fines. The number of breach notifications actually rose by 19% in that same 12-month period. So we had 20 months. And then in 12 months, we are up in fines, we are up in breach notifications. Now, interestingly enough, Italy, Germany, and France are the 3 countries that have been most willing to sanction companies, and they have collectively charged companies 192.8 million euros, 234 million US, since the GDPR came into force. Now, the biggest single fine, though, remains the $57 million fine that France leveled against Google for violating data transparency rules. Other massive fines include the UK's 123 million penalty to Marriott. That was a massive data breach. I'm sure all of you remember that. And that actually got knocked down to $25 million US. And so this is crazy, but they are ramping this up, and by virtue of it, we are seeing more breach notifications. We're also getting breached more as well as companies are struggling to keep up with the innovation I think that cyber threat has. But my question is, sitting here in the United States, when will we get this level of protection for our users? I think the GDPR is great. Now, the reason why I'm bringing this up is because in December, I got a chance to interview Congresswoman Robin Kelly. She is the Congresswoman for Illinois' 2nd District in the U.S. House of Representatives. And I talked to her about getting our own GDPR, and she indicated that this would actually be a debate. It would be a debate in Congress because basically what they're looking at is 2 camps, one sitting on the side of states' rights, meaning the state should have that ability, or the federal government. And so depending on what side you're on, this may actually be a debate which could possibly stall a GDPR. Now, here's my opinion on this. And I think this is important, and I would love to hear your thoughts, because obviously feel free to disagree with me. I'm totally cool with that. But while the U.S. Constitution does not expressly say it, the U.S. Supreme Court, who has the job to interpret and state what the Constitution does say, has actually said this on multiple occasions. We have a right to privacy. We have a constitutional right to privacy. Now, our privacy concerns essentially are about online presence more than anything at this point. So I believe our constitutional rights extend to that. In past rulings, they weren't talking about online. They were talking about the right to privacy, whether it's for medical or other means. But the U.S. Supreme Court has made very clear in their writings and decisions that we indeed have a constitutional right to privacy. And now that our privacy is extended vastly into the online world with Facebooks and Googles and everything else, our constitutional right here in the United States extends to that. This is my belief. Now, the U.S. spinning up a GDPR for itself I think would actually be helpful to maintain that constitutional right to privacy. So consider this under the umbrella of the Fourth Amendment. Essentially, that is rights to privacy in various ways that we have. This essentially, a US GDPR would essentially reinforce that. Further, if you're looking at some of the big proponents of this, Apple CEO Tim Cook has lent his backing to this idea, as have members of the outgoing Trump administration. Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, for example, called for the U.S. to launch a new data protection body with similar enforcement powers. Now, while the Government Accountability Office says that the new rules are needed, they're actually suggesting that the Federal Trade Commission, or FTC, is the best place to basically act as that regulator. Now, my thought is any way we get there is fine, but I believe that we need a universal GDPR here in the United States. I believe that is a reinforcement or very possible within the US Constitution's right to privacy. And I would love to hear your thoughts on this, because this isn't going anywhere soon. And we've seen pockets of this with New York Shield. The big one is California's CCPA. Oregon's got one. Here in Illinois, I'm out of Chicago, we've got the biometrics privacy law. But there's no real regulation on this. And while I'm not for, let's say, all of these different types of regulations, understanding that we have a fundamental right to privacy that doesn't, let's say, allow law enforcement to buy at will our GPS location without a warrant, which I've literally done videos on. That is the law of the land, or lack thereof. This fixes a lot of those problems and protects our rights even more than we've got right now. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. But those were your breaches of the week. Again, just another crazy long video, and hopefully nobody was hit, but I'm going to say, yeah, a good chunk of you were. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP, and please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well. And as always, stay safe and stay online. Thanks, everyone.